The scent of warm cinnamon floated through the air like a song, soft and sweet, winding through the cobbled streets of the sleepy town of Winderley. It drifted between shuttered windows, curled around sleepy lampposts, and tugged gently at the noses of early risers. Just as the sun peeked over the hills with a golden yawn, a pale blue door creaked open at the edge of Maple Row, and from it came a puff of steam, rich, golden, and full of wonder. Inside, flour danced like snowflakes in the morning light. A wooden spoon stirred itself in a large copper bowl, swishing quietly to a rhythm only it seemed to hear. Rows of tiny glass jars lined the shelves, each glowing faintly with colors that shimmered and shifted like bubbles whispering ingredients with names like featherfluff, star sugar, and dreamseed dust. It was not an ordinary bakery. No one ever saw who delivered the flour, and no one ever remembered seeing the baker shop for eggs. Yet, every morning, loaves appeared with crusts that glimmered like sunrise, and cupcakes rose with swirls of cream that sighed gently as if alive. Children who ate the honey buns said they dreamed of flying whales and laughing clouds. Grown-ups who nibbled the moon muffins sometimes woke with answers to problems they'd long forgotten how to solve. But no one truly knew how it worked, only that magic was somehow kneaded into every batch. And on one particularly chilly morning, as fog curled low across the rooftops and the scent of nutmeg filled the air, a small hand reached for the bakery's doorknob, unaware that everything in Winderley was about to change. The hand belonged to Elsie, a quiet girl with hair like soft wheat and eyes the color of dusk. She didn't often smile, though she wasn't unhappy, just thoughtful, always listening more than speaking. Her boots scuffed against the stone step as she opened the bakery's door, which sighed as it swung inward, releasing a gust of warmth and the scent of vanilla. The bell above the door did not ring. Instead, it chimed a soft note like a lullaby played on a harp, a sound that only children seemed to notice. Elsie stepped inside, her hands tucked into her coat sleeves. She had passed the bakery every morning since she could remember, but this was the first time she had ever entered. No one ever said not to, yet very few children did. It wasn't fear that kept them away. It was something gentler, a feeling, like the way one might feel before walking into a dream. The counter gleamed with sugar-dusted pastries, each one resting like a treasure on its tray. Behind the counter, golden ovens lined the walls, their doors glowing faintly as if something celestial was baking within. Pans hung from the ceiling, spinning slowly without wind, and the chalkboard on the wall changed its writing all on its own, listing new treats in looping, graceful letters. Elsie stepped forward, her breath catching, as she spotted a small tart sitting alone on a porcelain dish. It was perfectly round, filled with something that shimmered between blue and lavender, topped with a petal that blinked softly, like an eye just waking up. A little card floated beside it, not resting on the table but hovering, as though waiting for her. In delicate lettering, it read, "Dream Starter Tart, 1 per soul, for those who are ready." Ready for what? Elsie wondered. Her fingers hovered just above the plate. She wasn't hungry. Not really, but something deep inside her stirred, like the flutter of wings or a candle flame catching light. She touched the edge of the tart. It was cool, like morning dew. And then, with quiet certainty, she took a bite. The bakery faded. In its place came stars. She was no longer standing on a floor, but floating through a space made of music and color. Wisps of light spun around her like ribbons, whispering songs without words. Below her feet, though, there was no ground dreams formed, like soap bubbles, rising from an unseen sea. She could see each one clearly, a boy chasing a dragon made of paper, a girl painting the sky with her voice, an old man turning grief into laughter. And then, among them, she saw her own dream. Small, quiet. It looked like a garden, full of locked gates and closed blossoms, with a single bench in the middle where a girl sat alone. Elsie floated closer. The girl on the bench was her, but younger, perhaps 4 or 5. She was humming to herself, tracing circles in the dirt with one finger, waiting for someone who never came. Elsie reached out. As her hand brushed the garden gate, something changed. The blossoms began to open. Soft pinks and blues unfolded toward the sky. The child on the bench looked up, not frightened, but surprised. She smiled, not wide, not loud, just enough. And with that smile, the stars vanished. Elsie blinked. She was back in the bakery, standing by the counter, the tart gone from the plate. A feeling lingered in her chest, warm and buzzing, like the aftertaste of sunlight. The door opened behind her with a soft chime, and in walked a boy with wild curls and curious eyes. His name was Jonah, though Elsie didn't know it yet. He paused, sensing the strange hush in the air, and his gaze landed on the same porcelain plate. Now, a different pastry rested there, a cookie shaped like a key, silver and glinting. A new card hovered beside it, unlocker biscuit, for those with unopened doors. Without a word, Jonah stepped forward. And so it began. Each morning after that, the bakery offered a new treat, each one different, each one meant for someone who needed it. Some were sweet, others savory. A tart for bravery, a roll for remembering, a cupcake for letting go. They came with cards that told just enough, not too much, and always disappeared after one bite. Word spread gently, never loudly. Children came not because they were told to, but because they felt pulled, as if something inside them whispered, "There's something waiting for you." The town of Winderley began to glow in small ways. Shy kids spoke up, lonely ones found friends. A boy who hadn't laughed in a year started humming again. Even the grown-ups, though they rarely entered, began to notice that their mornings felt a little lighter, their steps a bit less tired. But not everyone was pleased. Near the edge of Winderley stood a tall, gray building with windows that never opened. Inside lived Mr. Nibber, a man with a nose shaped like a question mark and a voice that scratched like dried leaves. He was the town's efficiency officer, though no one quite knew what that meant. He walked with a clipboard clutched to his chest, muttering about rules, order, and charts. Mr. Nibber did not trust things he couldn't measure. And nothing about the bakery made sense to him. No delivery schedules, no receipts, no records. Yet the ovens glowed, the shelves remained full, and children kept going in and coming out different. One morning, he stood across the street, tapping his foot. He watched Elsie step through the door, followed by Jonah, then a girl with freckles and a feather in her hair. They emerged minutes later, their faces calm and full of something he couldn't name. Mr. Nibber did not like things he couldn't name. He decided to investigate. The next day, just before sunrise, he marched down Maple Row, his long coat flapping behind him. He reached for the doorknob of the bakery, then paused. His hand trembled, the door felt warm. Not hot, not burning, just warm, like a hand reaching back to hold his. He snatched his fingers away and scowled. Instead of entering, he peered through the window. Inside, the bakery glowed. Pans floated lazily in mid-air, sugar shimmered over the counter, and the ovens pulsed like quiet hearts. No one visible. No baker, no children, just motion and light, and the sense of something alive. He backed away. Over the following days, Mr. Nibber watched more carefully. He made notes. He counted how many children went in, how long they stayed, what time the door opened, what smells drifted out. His notes never made sense. One morning, he wrote, 10 children entered, 11 exited. Another day, door opened at 600, closed again, then opened at 555, time error. His clipboard grew heavy with confusion. Then, something stranger happened. The pastries began appearing elsewhere. One morning, a small boy named Ollie found a muffin on his windowsill, wrapped in a napkin embroidered with a star. A card read, "For the dream you forgot, eat before sunrise." Another girl discovered a cookie under her pillow, shaped like a question mark, with the note, "For courage to ask." The bakery wasn't just baking, it was reaching, it was choosing. Mr. Nibber grew more agitated. He began warning people, telling them the pastries were unnatural, that magic was unreliable, that dreams were not practical. But the townsfolk had already begun to understand something deeper, something they didn't need to explain with words. Still, Mr. Nibber was not done. One rainy afternoon, as the sky wept softly over Winderley, he stood beneath his black umbrella and made a decision. If he could not stop the bakery with rules or warnings, he would stop it another way. He would enter, he would eat, he would prove it was nothing but flour and sugar and nonsense. That evening, just as the last drops of rain slid down the gutters, Mr. Nibber stepped forward. He reached for the door. It did not open. He pushed again. Nothing. It stood silent, sealed, as if the bakery itself had made a choice. Inside, Elsie stood by the counter, watching the tart that floated before her. This one pulsed with a soft golden light, its card read for the dream that will change everything. She didn't know what it meant. Not yet. But the ovens glowed brighter than ever. Something was coming. Something big. The wind changed that night. It swept through Winderley with a hush that wasn't quite silence, curling around rooftops and rattling shutters, as if whispering secrets no one wanted to hear. Clouds hung low like heavy blankets, pressing the town into a strange stillness. Lights flickered, shadows stretched, and for the first time in years, the scent of the bakery did not drift through the streets at dawn. People noticed. Children stopped at the corner of Maple Row and frowned. The pale blue door stayed shut, the windows dim. No warmth, no pastries, no music in the air. Even the bell above the door remained silent. Inside, something had shifted. The copper ovens were cold. The pans no longer floated. The shelves, once full of glowing jars, were now dull and silent. Only Elsie remained, sitting quietly at a wooden stool in the center of the room, the dream tart still resting untouched before her. Its golden light pulsed weakly, as though it too was waiting afraid to be forgotten. Elsie didn't know how it had happened. The day before, the bakery had been full of life. She had come to help tidy the shelves, as she often did now, not because anyone asked her, but because it felt like home. Jonah had been there too, cleaning the windows with a cloth that sparkled when it touched glass. But after Mr. Nibber's last visit, after he had stood at the door and glared in as though trying to freeze the air with his stare, the bakery had changed. It was as if it had retreated, curled in on itself like a frightened animal. Elsie pressed her hands to the table and tried to listen, not with her ears, but with that quiet place inside her that the bakery had taught her to trust. A place of stillness and wonder, where dreams spoke softly and waited to be believed. At first, there was nothing. Then faint and fragile a whisper, like sugar dissolving in warm milk. Something is broken. Elsie rose. Her heart pounded in her chest, not with fear, but with urgency. She looked around, the jars, the ovens, the chalkboard. Everything that once moved on its own now sat lifeless. And then she noticed it. The dream seed jar. It had cracked. A thin fracture ran through its center, glowing a sickly gray instead of its usual shimmering purple. From the crack, a faint thread of dark smoke drifted into the air, curling like ink in water. The label had changed too. Where it once read, "Dream seed dust, plant with kindness," now it said, "Drained." Elsie's breath caught. She had seen this jar glow when children found their dreams. She had watched it refill itself, glowing brighter with each kindness, each act of courage or hope. It was the heart of the bakery, and now it was empty. The bakery hadn't stopped on its own. It had been drained. Outside, Mr. Nibber stood at the corner, watching. He hadn't done anything. Not really. Not in the way people usually think of doing. He hadn't stolen. He hadn't broken anything with his hands. But his presence, his doubts, his coldness, his refusal to believe in wonder had crept through the cracks like wind under a door. He had let the fear of the unknown grow roots. He had convinced others to question the bakery's magic, not with force, but with suspicion. And suspicion, like shadow, dims the brightest lights. Elsie turned to the dream tart. Its golden glow was almost gone. The card still hovered beside it, words trembling in the air, for the dream that will change everything. She understood now. The bakery was built on belief, on trust, kindness, and the quiet bravery of those who still dared to wonder. The treats it baked were not just food, they were woven from hope, from dreams. And the dream seed jar. It could only refill when someone planted something new. But the dream had to be real. Not just imagined, but shared. Elsie placed her hand over the tart. Her fingers trembled, not with fear, but with choice. To eat the tart would be to give something of herself, a dream, a real one, something that mattered, something that cost. She closed her eyes and reached deep. She found it there, just beneath her ribs. The dream she'd hidden since the garden, since the day her younger self had waited alone. It wasn't a loud dream. It wasn't even grand. It was simple, but powerful. She wanted to create a place where no one ever had to feel alone again. a place where quiet children could belong, a place of welcome, of warmth, of wonder, a place like the bakery. Her heart beat once, twice, then everything around her stilled. She took a bite. Light burst outward. The tart vanished in a swirl of gold and rose, and the pulse of magic shivered through the bakery, like thunder wrapped in song. The ovens flared to life, the shelves shook. The floating pans danced into the air with laughter. One by one, the jars on the wall lit up, glowing, humming, spinning with joy. The dream seed jar healed. It glowed brighter than ever before, and from it, a single seed rose, a pearl-like speck of light that hovered in the air, then drifted gently down into Elsie's waiting hands. The door creaked open. Children stood outside, their faces wide with wonder. Jonah was at the front, his hands tucked behind his back, his eyes shining. Mr. Nibber was there too, though he stood apart, clutching his clipboard tightly, blinking at the strange light pouring through the doorway. Elsie stepped forward and held up the seed. The wind stilled. The bakery watched. And then, gently, Elsie stepped outside. She knelt at the edge of the bakery's tiny garden, the one that had always been just grass and stone, and pressed the seed into the earth. The ground glowed. A tremor of warmth pulsed through the stone path, and from the soil, slowly, a flower began to bloom. Not just any flower, a dream blossom. Its petals changed color as they opened: gold, lavender, silver, blue, and in its center shimmered a swirl of tiny stars. The children gasped. Mr. Nibber dropped his clipboard, and somewhere above, the bell rang not with a chime, but a song made of hope. The flower swayed gently in the morning breeze, its petals open wide, glowing with a light that was not bright, but deep, like the glow of someone remembering a happy dream. As Elsie rose to her feet, the garden around the bakery began to stir. Shoots of green peeked through the soil, and soft vines curled up the walls like curious fingers reaching for the sky. It was as if the ground itself had remembered how to hope. Inside the bakery, the ovens pulsed with warmth once more. The air filled with the scent of fresh bread and sugar spun with sunlight. Pastries appeared on the counter again, each one soft and glowing, ready to be discovered. But something was different now. Where once the magic was gentle and quiet, now it hummed with joy, like laughter that refused to be hidden. Children gathered outside, their faces upturned with wonder. Jonah stepped forward and placed a hand on the windowsill, watching as a tray of tiny muffins floated by. He didn't reach for one, not yet. He just watched, his eyes wide and full of something more than curiosity. It was respect, as if he understood now that the magic here was alive, not just in the treats, but in the people who believed in them. Mr. Nibber stood at the edge of the crowd. His shoulders were stiff, and his hands gripped his coat tightly. He looked at the flower blooming in the bakery's garden, and for a long moment, he said nothing. Then he turned to leave. But before he could take a step, a little girl tugged at his sleeve. She held a tart wrapped in a napkin, embroidered with a sunbeam. A note floated beside it. For the one who forgot how to feel joy, she offered it to him, her eyes kind and patient. Mr. Nibber froze. He stared at the tart. He looked at the girl. Then, slowly, he reached out and took it. He didn't eat it, not yet, but he held it gently in his hands, as if remembering what it meant to hold something soft. Days passed, then weeks. The bakery returned to its quiet rhythm, but now it felt more like a heartbeat than a secret. Children came not only to eat, but to help to polish pans, restock jars, and sweep flour into gentle piles shaped like stars. Elsie was always there, her presence calm and steady, her eyes brighter than they'd ever been. She had become something like the keeper of the bakery, not its owner, not its master, but its heart. Jonah came too, often with new ideas. He built a bench beside the flower garden and carved the words, "Here, all are welcome," into its back. Others began to bring seeds, planting their own small dreams beside the first blossom. Soon, the bakery's garden was full of colors, each flower different, each one glowing faintly in its own rhythm. It became a place where people sat quietly and listened to the wind, waiting for dreams to speak. No one ever found out who built the bakery or where the ingredients came from. No baker ever appeared behind the counter. But the town stopped asking. They didn't need to know. They had learned that some magic is not meant to be solved, only shared. And Mr. Nibberwell, he changed too. Slowly. One day, he left his clipboard at home. Another day, he smiled just once at a child passing by. Then, one morning, he brought a basket of empty jars to the bakery, lined with clean napkins and wrapped in twine. A note was tucked inside, in case you need more. The children let him place them on the shelf. He didn't stay long. But after he left, the bell above the bakery door rang a little brighter than usual. Years later, the town of Winderley would still tell the story of the bakery that baked dreams. Of the girl with wheat-colored hair who saved it, of the flower that bloomed when hope was planted, of the treats that were more than sweets, and of the day when the ovens went cold only to rise again, brighter than ever. They would say that dreams are not just things you have while you sleep, they are things you live when you are brave enough to believe. And if you ever visit Winderley, and walk down Maple Row just as the sun begins to rise, you might catch the scent of cinnamon in the air, drifting through the morning mist. If you follow it, you'll find a pale blue door, warm to the touch, with a little bell that sings when opened. Step inside, and you may find something waiting just for you. A cookie, a tart, a biscuit, each one carrying a dream wrapped in sugar and wonder. But be gentle. The magic knows. It always knows when you're ready.